Buonasera, benvenuti e bentornati, bentrovati al nostro appuntamento del pomeriggio con il Museo Ebraico di Lecce. Questa sera abbiamo il piacere e l'onore di avere con noi una carissima amica, Judith Cohen, che è una delle più importanti ricercatrici di tutto il mondo di musica sefardita, di musica ebraica sefardita. Ha ricercato canti, tradizioni delle varie comunità sefardite diffuse in tutto il Mediterraneo per molti anni e ha un repertorio ricchissimo di musiche che stasera ci farà ascoltare e che discuterà con noi. Sono molto felice di averla qui. Lei vive in Canada, insegna alla York University e lavora per Alan Lomax Archive di New York. E tra poco ci parlerà in inglese dal Canada e ci racconterà e ci farà vedere tantissimi aspetti della sua ricchissima ricerca. Good evening. Welcome back to the Facebook program, live program of the Museo Ebraico Jewish Museum of Lecce. We are very pleased, honored, and excited to have with us a very old friend and one of the most important and best known experts all over the world of Sephardic music, Judith Cohen. She lives in Canada. She works there at the York University and at the Alan Lomax Archive in New York. And she has been traveling all around the Mediterranean, and she has found out and researched all over many countries, and any country all around the Mediterranean. She knows everything about Sephardic music. And she will be, yes, and she will be explaining us a lot of things, and she will showing us, and we'll be hearing wonderful music. So enjoy the show. Thank you very much for being with us, and please take the floor and let us start this wonderful show.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. I wish I did know everything. I don't think anybody could know everything, but it's a real honor to be here. And of course, we are all using the word "to be" in a different way these days. I'm sitting in my house in Canada, and you're sitting in Italy, and I don't even know where everybody else is sitting or standing or walking around. And I don't know if they're looking at this on a telephone or on a big screen or a medium screen or where they are, but almost everybody who is here alone, but all together, which is an exciting new way of doing things, even if we wish the reason for doing it were a little bit less frightening. Anyway, I'm going to talk about Sephardic songs around the Mediterranean, from Morocco to the former Ottoman lands, to the areas that are now Greece and Turkey and the Balkans and Israel. And of course, there are modern Sephardic songs now, and they're sung in new ways, and we're not probably going to get to too much of that, except a little bit at the very end. So we're going to sort of take a little trip through time and space and see a little bit of how this works. So can you all see the map? Can everyone see the map? So in 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs of Spain, expelled the Jews from most of what is today called Spain. I'm just going to say Spain. Of course, at the time, it was the Kingdom of Leon and the Kingdom of Aragon and so on, but we're just going to call it Spain. Portugal expelled the Jews in 1497, just 5 years later. And the Kingdom of Navarra, up in the north of Spain, in this little corner here, expelled them in 1498. The main diaspora developed all through the Mediterranean, especially in what are now Morocco. You can see, of course, it's very, very close to the tip of Spain. The Balkan countries, today's Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Serbia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, and Israel, And of course, some of them on the way along the Mediterranean stopped in Livorno and other places in today's Italy. And some of them actually stayed there and settled and didn't go with the rest of their compatriots as far as the Balkans and Turkey. And of course, eventually there were secondary diasporas that reached the Americas and elsewhere. And in Spain and Portugal, some Jews actually stayed on as secret Jews, Catholics on the outside, Jews on the inside, and recently they've been reclaiming their Jewish identity publicly. So let's talk about what the words actually mean. We hear the word Sephardic, we hear Judeo-Spanish, we hear Ladino. So the old Jewish word from the Old Testament for what today are Spain and Portugal is Sepharad. Originally it referred to a location in the Middle East, possibly Sardis, but very soon, about 2,000 years ago, so really very early on, it started referring to what are now Spain and Portugal. And so Sephardic, and in English we often write it PH, and in French and in Spanish with an F, Sephardic refers to people and culture who are descended from old Sepharad. Today, the term is used very broadly, and so often people use it to refer to Jewish people from many different countries, almost anyone who does not speak Yiddish, the Judeo-German language of the Ashkenazi Jews of Central and Eastern Europe. But we're going to be referring to classic Sephardic from Spain and Portugal. For the language, we have all kinds of different terms. You hear Judeo-Spanish, Ladino. Now, Ladino originally was only for direct translations from Hebrew, but now it's used very generally. Some people said Judesmo, Judeo, the Jewish language, Spaniol, and in Morocco, they say Haketia. Today, the term Ladino is really the most common, although some people do prefer Judeo-Spanish. The basis is Old Castilian, with elements of Catalan, elements of Portuguese, a lot of Hebrew, and in the diaspora, vocabulary from Turkish, from Greek, from Slavic languages, from Moroccan Arabic, depending on the location where they were living. And then, of course, later on, they added bits and pieces from Italian and from French. And most recently, now that they have to have words for things like Zoom and internet and Facebook, words from English as well. So it's a dynamic language. It's not a frozen language in the past. It's a language that has lived all these centuries and changed all these centuries. And we're trying to make sure it keeps on living and keeps changing. So most of the songs that we're going to talk about today are in Ladino, but of course there are songs in Hebrew and other languages of Sephardic cultures that are Sephardic songs as well. So today, as I said, we'll be talking about songs in Ladino or Judeo-Spanish. So first we're going to dispense with two myths. There's two big myths or misunderstandings that circulate very often. So no, Sephardic songs are not medieval. They just are not. And they're also not flamenco and they're not fado. So how old are they? We don't have any surviving Sephardic songs with both words and music from medieval Spain. We don't even have them from Renaissance Spain. The only medieval Jewish song, and of course, Fabrizio, you know this very well, preserved with both words and music in a manuscript is not even from Spain. It's from today's Italy, from southern Italy, by a convert to Judaism who was known as Ovadia in the year 1102. And the music is actually written from right to left to accommodate the Hebrew. It's a totally unique manuscript. It was discovered a little over a century ago in what's called the Geniza, and that's a whole, in Egypt, it's a whole complicated story, which I won't get into because it would take the whole rest of our time. But that's about it. There are no Sephardic songs with words and music going back this early. So we'll come back to what there is in a minute. You don't need instruments. You'll hear people play Sephardic songs with all kinds of instruments. The only instrument you really need for Sephardic music is a voice. Instruments are used. They can be used all the time. They're not a problem. And they're typically the instruments of the local culture all around the Mediterranean or even modern instruments today. So except for Jewish holy days when Orthodox Judaism does not permit instruments to be played, so except for those times, so you won't hear them in a synagogue service, for example, except for those times, you can use just about any instrument you like. Women usually had their hands occupied with various kinds of work. And so they didn't usually play melody instruments. They could, it wasn't a problem. They just usually didn't have time to do that. So they were experts very often on kinds of frame drums, on different kinds of tamburellos or panderetas. And weddings were animated by women wedding singers with their drums and their songs, and they would sing one song after another after another. They wouldn't just sing one. One woman would start, and then all the women would join in, and they'd go on to the next song, and people would dance, and they would eat, and so on. The men played all kinds of instruments. They would play as well the frame drums. They would play the oud. And this is Sami al-Maghribi, a famous Moroccan Jewish musician who spent the last half of his life in Montreal. He was my oud teacher. The Turkish balamassaz, the darbuka, violin is played very often, the kanun, which is held on your lap or on a table. And as I said, really just about any instrument from the culture you're living in can be used. These are the classic song genres or types of songs and their functions when they're heard, when they're used. And I also just want to mention that traditional singing styles are really different in Morocco and in the former Ottoman lands, in the Balkans and Greece and Turkey. So the oldest kind is the ballad. And when I say ballad, you know, in English, we have an association with the ballad as a kind of popular love song, but this is an older meaning of ballad. It's a romance in Spanish, a narrative ballad, a song that tells a story. It's sung mostly by women, and it's not a rule. Men can sing a ballad. There's not a problem with a man singing a ballad. It's just that usually women sang them. They're very long, and they tell these long stories. And so while you're sitting and you're cooking and you're working in the kitchen and you're sewing and you're taking care of the baby and you're singing lullabies to the baby, your hands are busy, but your voice is not busy. And so you would sing these long, long ballads. Life cycle songs, especially wedding songs, but of course also songs for the birth, for the ritual circumcision, the Brit Milah, for coming of age, the boy's bar mitzvah, and in modern times, the girl's bat mitzvah, courtship, and of course, laments and songs of death. And these are mostly sung by women, except for the ones in Hebrew, which are mostly sung by men. Songs for the Jewish calendar cycle and the Sabbath, so going right through the Jewish calendar year. And these are often in a mixture, part Hebrew and part Ladino, and in the form of what we call coplas. And they're sung by both men and women. And then this is what you've probably mostly heard. Most people who have heard Sephardic songs have heard what they call canticas. And they're mostly not from Morocco. They're mostly from the Balkans and Turkey, the Eastern Mediterranean, Ottoman lands. And these are your love songs, Adio Querida, Yo me enamoré de un aire, topical songs, satirical songs, parodies, social commentary, perhaps a little bit more women than men, but really both. And they're quite modern. So ironically, these are the songs most people know. And these are the songs most people say, oh, you know, this goes back to medieval Spain, which they don't. And they're actually the most relatively modern part of the repertoire. They tend to be from about the mid-19th century on. And then finally, newly composed songs. Just as I said, the language itself is dynamic and it keeps changing and evolving. So do the songs. You can't have a repertoire with no new songs. And so there are songs with known composers, such as the beloved Flora Yagoda, who is in her mid-90s now. So let's look at these different genres a bit. The romance. So people sometimes confuse romance with romanza. Originally, they were the same thing, but now people tend to use romanza as a kind of romantic song. The old romances, the old narrative ballads, they're similar to the idea of Italian narrative songs, you know, such as Donna Lombarda. And they're quite rarely sung. A romancero is all the romances together. It's a corpus of romances, a collection of romances. And just to be technical for a minute, we won't get very technical, but a romance in Spanish has an indefinite number of assonant lines. And usually there's 16 syllables each. There's other forms too, but the most typical is 16 each, divided into 2 8-syllable hemistichs. So this is how it works. If you see this written out, you can count. Girineldo, Girineldo, mi caballero pulido, quien te me diera esta noche 3 horas en mi servicio. Now, of course, you're not going to recite it. You're going to sing it. Girineldo, Girineldo, mi caballero pulido, quien te me diera esta noche 3 horas en mi servicio. And the way it works is that any tune, that works for this form can work for any of the ballads if they're in the same form with the same number of syllables. So the tunes can be interchangeable. Romances have been classified in various ways. The one most usually used for Sephardic ballads isn't necessarily the most logical, but it groups some by their story themes or their motifs and others by time periods. So for example, they call them epic ballads, Carolingian ballads, historical, biblical, adulterous women, Moorish ballads, classical, prisoners, faithful love, unfaithful love, husband's return, not the wife's return because the wife never goes away, incest, amorous adventures, tricks, women who are seduced and women who do the seducing, and so on. So needless to say, these categories were made up, several decades ago by men, not by women. And we just keep using them because they're there and they're convenient to use, not because they necessarily make a lot of sense. And it's not a musical categorization, it's just by theme. So here we have a few ballads. And some of the oldest recordings we have very old recordings actually of Sephardic music, not so much from Morocco, but from the old Ottoman Empire. The recording industry already was there in 1906. So we have recordings of Sephardic songs from 1906, 1908, 1910 and on. And many of them have been remastered and cleaned up with laser technology, and you can hear them. A lot of them are available online. So here's an old ballad. It's originally Melisenda, but it's in a Bosnian Sevdalinka form. So the melody is Bosnian, sort of old Bosnian Turkish style, and it's sung by the cantor Abinun, Eliezer Abinun, around 1960. And it's an old Carolingian story of the princess Melisenda, who can't sleep because she's in love with a count, and so she decides to go out and find him. And on the way, she encounters her father's watchman. And he says, "Where are you going? You can't leave the castle. I'm going to tell your father on you." And she says, "Oh, just loan me a dagger because there's dogs barking and I want to kill the dogs so they don't bother me." And instead of killing any dogs, she cuts off his head and goes to see her lover. Very cheerful song, often used as a lullaby. Most people don't know the whole story, and this is just a little bit of Eliezer Abinun singing it.
Noches, noches, buenas noches, noches son de enamorar. Noches son de enamorar.
So like many of the ballads, the words are very old. The song was certainly known to Sephardic Jews around the time of the expulsion, but we don't know what melody they sang, and we don't know exactly the variant of the words. Especially we don't know the tune. Rabbi Isaac Al-Ghazi, this is a recording from the 1930s. So he, like most of the men at the time in the community, he sang in Hebrew. He was a rabbi. He led synagogue services. He also sang classical Turkish music, and he also sang in Ladino. And this is the old ballad, narrative ballad of the warrior Maiden. It exists in many, many languages all through Europe. It's the story of the king who has only daughters and no sons to go to war for him. And so the youngest daughter gets up and she says, "Oh, father, I will disguise myself as a boy and I will go off and fight in the war for your honor." that amazing? Berta Aguado, or Bienvenida Aguado, from Turkey and Israel. She passed away just a few years ago in her 90s. She was probably the best living Turkish singer of the old Sephardic ballads.
İpizarlaz yervas yartar mede ya.
And in Montreal, I recorded Bertha singing that in Israel in 1991. And many of the Moroccan women in Montreal, most of these women have now passed away. This was in the 1980s and 1990s. But they developed a new context for singing ballads. Instead of singing as they were sewing and taking care of their babies and cooking, they sang at the Club Sepharad d'Âge d'Or de Bingo, the Senior Citizens Sephardic Golden Age Bingo Club. And I actually collected quite a number of ballads at the Bingo Club with him singing. See if this comes up. So it's not a concert performance. Of course, they were actually playing bingo while they were singing the song. This is Jumol, or Julia Ederi, from the Moroccan town of Larache and Montreal. And the matesha was a swing. It was a big swing that they would put up in the courtyard right around this time of year when the weather was getting really nice. And the unmarried girls would go and sit on the swing, and they would take turns singing ballads. And sometimes the boys would watch them from afar and see which girl they were interested in. And in between one ballad and the next, one romance and the next, they would sing a little rhyme, half in Spanish and half in Moroccan Arabic. And the rhyme would say, oh, swing and swing, the king gives the queen a glass of silver. And who should get off the swing now and make room for the next girl? So it just goes, Matesha, Matesha, atini pisara, vaso de oro, lleno de tesoro, vaso de plata, llena de patata, le dice el rey a la reina, que se levante, Rachelica, y se siente camillica. And this is my old ensemble, Gerineldo, which was named for the ballad that I showed you just quickly here on the ballad page. The story of Gerineldo, it's classified as a Carolingian ballad. And in Gerineldo is the king's servant, his page. And he falls in love with the princess, and the princess falls in love with him. And she invites him up to her room at night, at midnight. And he says, what? You're making fun of me. I'm just a servant. You can't invite me up to your bedroom. And she says, no, I expect you at midnight. And so he goes up, and they fall asleep together, but the king hears something, and he goes into the room and he says, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? To save the honor of my kingdom, I should really kill them. But I don't want to kill my daughter. She's my daughter. I love her. I don't want to kill Gerineldo because he's going to be a really great knight in my court. So they're going to have to marry each other. And so we have the expression in Moroccan Judeo-Spanish, may you have the mazal, the good luck of Gerineldo. But in the original ballad, they don't get married because Gerineldo, in the old Spanish ballad, says to the king, oh, so sorry, I've sworn an oath to only marry a virgin, and after last night with me, your daughter isn't one anymore. Sorry about that, king. But the Sephardic ballad does have a happy ending where they get married, and so it goes, Gerineldo, Gerineldo, mi caballero pulido, quien te me diera esta noche 3 horas en mi servicio. Como soy vuestro criado, señora, burláis conmigo. Yo no burlo Girinello, que de veras te lo digo, and so on. If we ever see each other in person, I'll sing the whole thing for you, and I'll teach it to you. But we're going to move on for now to wedding songs and other life cycle songs. This is a beautiful old painting by the French painter Delacroix, of a Moroccan Jewish bride in 1832. And these are weddings that took place here and here in Montreal, in the Moroccan Jewish community. And they were actually real weddings. They were open to the Sephardic public. You could go and you could hear the songs, but it was actually a real wedding where this couple really, truly was getting married. And this dress was made by hand by my friend Suzy Ben-Shimol here in Toronto. And it's velvet with real gold embroidery. And what they say is that every bride should be a queen on her wedding day. And so if it was a poor bride in the old days in Morocco who didn't have the money, the wealthiest woman, the woman with the most money in the community, would give the bride her best dress to wear for that day so that she too could be a queen on the day of her wedding. Normally, this was in Toronto. You wouldn't see the bride dancing like this on her own wedding. You will now, you will today. But in the old days, she would sit very modestly with her eyes cast down, and she was wearing a very heavy headdress also, so she wasn't really in a position to dance around. But today, of course, things are relaxed. This is in Salonika. It's from a classic 1920s or 1930s postcard of Sephardic Jewish women dancing and singing and playing the tambourine, like a tamburello, and a violinist in Salonika. And this one is from Sarajevo. So when there was a Moroccan wedding in the old days, the groom would go to the bride's house and demand the bride. And then the bride's parents would walk her through the dark streets by candlelight, holding on to her by the elbows. So this is Sali Levy, who just passed away, unfortunately, 2 weeks ago. We just lost Sali Levy of Morocco and Canada. But this is Sali many years ago with our group, Gerineldo, singing, "Give Us the Bride." And then we all go into a Hebrew song, a Hebrew piyut, "Oh, Beautiful Gazelle."
Daimos a la novia que por ella venemos, si no molada a la ley volveremos, y a la cena alma
And so if we were in the Sephardic community right now, they would all be singing, every single one of them. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of how the rhythms work in these wedding songs. This is a Moroccan hand-painted henna drum. It doesn't have jingles on it, which a traditional wedding tamburello or drum would, but I took it out because it's such a nice drum and it is from Morocco. In Morocco, you'll usually hear wedding songs with this kind of rhythm, one after another. Dale a cenar al desposado, dale a cenar que no ha cenado, dale a cenar al desposado, dale a cenar sopa de nabo. And they'll just keep the rhythm going. They'll add one song after another. La novia destrenza el pelo, se desmaya el caballero. ¿Y quién le irá a llamar? ¿Quién le irá a llamar al novio? ¿Quién le irá a llamar? And in the Balkans and Greece and Turkey and the Eastern Mediterranean, the former Ottoman lands, you might have songs that are in a straightforward 2 or 4, such as A Signora Novia, Abaixo abaixo, A Signora Novia, Abaixo abaixo. But you also have songs in Turkish and Bulgarian and Macedonian rhythms. So they might be in 7, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, but a fast 7, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. La comida la mañana, la tarde la traigo atrás. La comida la mañana, la tarde la traigo atrás. Or they might be in 9. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 2, 2, 2, 3. novias, para bodas las mis señoras, esta y otra. So just to give you an idea, and of course that goes on for hours and hours with lots of food and lots of dancing, things to drink. The calendar cycle, so we're not going to go right through the whole year, of course, because that would take forever, but we just finished the holiday of Passover, of Pesach, and this is from the 14th century Spanish Haggadah, the book of Passover, where you read the stories and you do the rituals and you sing the songs. And in Morocco, at the end of Passover, they have what's called the mimuna, where you take out all the things you can't eat during Passover, everything made with yeast and everything that rises. And you have an evening with songs and stories. And traditionally, your Muslim neighbors might come over and bring fresh bread because the Jewish women would not have had time to make the bread. And this is Purim, which is before Passover, and it is the story of the Old Testament book of Esther. And very often in Salonika, this picture here is from Bulgaria from the 1920s, but very often in Salonika, they would put on what they called operettas from the late 19th century on, and they would take the story of the book of Esther from the Old Testament, and they would make it into an opera. And so here, Buena Sarfati Garfinkel, who is from Salonika and Montreal, is singing both parts. She's singing Esther, telling the traitor Haman that he's going to hang, and she is also singing the part of Haman, the traitor, begging for mercy.
Piedad, Esther, piedad, piedad por tu majestad, enforcar Haman, enforcar, y un negro descarrancar Haman. Esther, basta, Esther, basta.
And this is a song called a Hilula, a song for the Hilula. The Hilula is a custom that's shared by both Jews and Muslims. And since we're in the time now of Ramadan, which just began, it's a good time to talk about this. It parallels local Muslim customs. So the Muslims will go to the tomb of a venerated saint, and the Jews will go to visit a tomb of a rabbi or another venerated person. And when I say a visit, it's a long visit. It's probably in a different town, not the town where you live. So you're going to be there for a few days. You're going to sort of camp out and eat and pray and dance and sing. And each town in Morocco has one or more rabbis or other venerated figures associated with it. And the Hilula song basically lists these places. It says, where are you going, Yitzchak? Well, I'm going to such and such a town to pray at the tomb of such and such a rabbi. So here we're singing it with Gerinaldo, but in this picture, I'm actually singing it in Morocco in 2013 in a shared concert with a group of young Muslim women singers in Larache. So it was very, very moving. We sang Muslim songs and we sang Jewish songs, and the concert was actually in the last Catholic church still functioning in Larache. This is my good friend Zahra Buonani and her group Lala Menana. But the song here is the way we sang it with Gerinaldo.
Que nos vamos para Merón, para zorear, Arbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Su membración, sea bendición.
And here we're going to quickly look at a very short video just for a moment. I'm going to ask my friends at the museum, Marta, to call it up. This is Gerinaldo stopped performing in 1994 for a number of reasons, personal family reasons, but then we had a revival 20 years later in France and in Toronto. And this is from 2014, singing a song which is an alphabetic acrostic about the attributes of the Creator. It's with Sali leading it. This is 3 generations of Gerinaldo. We have Oro, who is the original founder-director, Oro Anohori Librovic. Kelly couldn't come, Sali, myself, and my daughter, the next generation down, Tamar Ilana, our Greek friend Dimitrios Petsalakis, and Sali's grandson, Matan Boker. So we had 3 generations in this last concert with Jerry Naldo. Can you hear a little bit of the video? You can find it. We'll give you the link on YouTube. Can you hear it? Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. I'll stop the video. And these are the songs. Can we stop the video now? Stop the video. So these are the songs that most people have heard. These are the miscellaneous songs, the lyric songs, the love songs, the social commentary. And as I said, we have very, very early recordings of these songs. One of them is this one. So that was Victoria Rosa Hazan, who was born in Turkey and lived much of her life in the United States, in New York City. Haim Effendi, Haim Behar Menahem, who was born in the 19th century. He was really the first great recording star and artist, but he was also a liturgical cantor and a singing style. And many, many people know this song of his, La Rosa Enflorece.
La rosa enflorece, oye, vente voy. La rosa enflorece, oye, vente voy. Dios más enflorece, perdiéndote, ay, Dios te enflorece, perdiéndote,
And Rosa Eskenazi, she was born as Sara Skinazi. She was born in Greece and she became a star rebetiko singer. Rebetiko was the music of the slums, the taverns of Greece in the 1920s and 1930s. Some people call it the Greek blues. So this song that she used to sing, Tamataxia, became a Sephardic song. The Greek song Tamataxia became the Sephardic song A levantes Jacko, get up Jack, and get ready to serve your guests in the tavern. So this is the original, sung by Rosa Eskenazi. And then in 1991, in Salonika, I recorded this version of the Sephardic song, the Sephardic version of the song.
Adelante, Jacob, en las bolas bien feliz, no te mostres flaco, tienes usted.
These are just some photos. We have here a trip that the group called Ladino Comunità, which is a group of Sephardic people from all over the world who met on the internet, but try and do a trip every year or every 2 years. And here they are singing on the bus in Turkey in 2008. This is a Japanese woman, Yayoi Okaniwa, who lives in Jerusalem and has been studying all kinds of music from Israel, Jewish music, Ladino music, Arabic music, Christian Arab music, Byzantine music, as well as her own Japanese music and opera. And this is a concert we did together in Tel Aviv with my daughter last year. These are some of the really famous faces of Sephardic song today. Yoram Gaon, one of perhaps the most emblematic. Joaquin Diaz, who started the kind of Sephardic folk revival in Spain. Yasmin Levy, the daughter of the wonderful Isaac Levy, who was a singer, a scholar, a collector, a radio personality. Mor Karbasi, one of the rising stars of Sephardic song. And before we go to this video that just came out last night, here's a little bit of what you also hear of Sephardic songs that take the songs of their surroundings at the time. And this is at Charleston from the 1920s. And it's a Sephardic version that Buena sang that she grew up singing as a child and a teenager in Salonika.
Una moda salió, que ella moda improvisó. La moda es de Charleston. Es de una diabla, es de ella que habla. Es yo que la entendí. Una moda.
So before we leave this section, go on to a couple of last slides that I do want to show you. We're going to bring up this video. It only came out last night, not even 24 hours ago. It's a new self-isolation pandemic Ladino video of the popular love song Esta Montaña de Enfrente. And it was the brainchild of Marcelo and Liliana Benveniste, who are singers, folklorists, researchers. They run the online publication eSefarad. And what they did is they asked each of us, each of the people that you see in this picture, they asked each of us to sing only one line of this song, and then they edited it and put it together so that you hear the whole song sung by all of us. And I think there will be more songs like this coming. But this one I wanted to show you. It's really, just about the first time it's heard in public, as it were. Let's hear a little bit.
Esta montaña de enfrente
se siente va quemando.
allí termina mi amor.
Mas estoy llorando.
Arboricoleas seguir.
Yo lo sembré en mi huerta, yo lo crecí, lo engrandecí, otros están usando. Secretos de mi vida, no hay quien sepa mi dolor.
El cielo lleno por papel.
La
Los árboles por ventanas
para escribir mis
So that's an absolute first that I just wanted to share with you. I've only had it for, as I said, since about midnight last night. Before we leave this topic, I wanted to point out that there are Sephardic songs of the Holocaust. People are used to hearing mostly Yiddish songs, but there are many Sephardic songs as well. This is the plaque that was put out in Ladino and Judeo-Spanish in 2003 in Auschwitz. 97% of the Sephardic community in Salonika, Thessaloniki, disappeared in the Holocaust. 97%. One of the songs that was written on an old Greek tune, and it describes being taken in the train to Auschwitz from Salonika. David Chaim, who survived the Holocaust and sang this song after.
7 días encerrados en vagones de pemas, una vez a los 3 días os quitaban airear. Una vez a los 3 días os quitaban airear.
And we're going to go back to Buena again. She was a partisan in Salonika. She saved many lives of many Jewish children and many other lives. She brought food through the Red Cross. She narrowly escaped being killed many times. And she eventually married a Canadian Jewish man, which is why her other last name is Garfinkel, and moved to Montreal, where I met her and interviewed her extensively in the 1980s when I was writing my dissertation. Isaac Jack Levy of the Rhodes Sephardic community pioneered work on Sephardic Holocaust poetry, and he was followed by Shmuel Raphael in Israel and René Levin Melamed, also in Israel. And Buena wrote out many of these coplas, many of these sort of toasts. And some of them were funny and they were about daily life in Salonika, but many of them were about the war. And here she wrote, this is her handwriting, La Armada de Hitler se está enfloreciendo. Hitler's army is growing. They tomó el dancing. They took the dancing hall. Fue fina la Polonia, all the way to Poland. And she really narrated this and wrote about it and documented it in many ways. And here she's singing a song they sang at Passover. And instead of singing, they start singing about Pharaoh and the exodus from Egypt. But then she said they changed the words from Pharaoh to Hitler.
Oh, Pharaoh, ay, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, que te vean a dolor en el paso del garón. Si el Dios echa un truelo, creo que te pela entero, no te deja ni un pelo, mish. Si el Dios echa un truelo, creo que te queda un pelo, no te deja ni un pelo, mish. But we used to sing for Hitler. Ah, Hitler, Hitler, que te vean estremecer, que sea negro y cruel.
And just as a note, the Italian-speaking Jews, many of them from the island of Rhodes, of Rodas, they were forced to sing the Italian song Mamma son tanto felice in the concentration camps as they worked and as they were tortured. I'm just going to show you a couple more things that people ask about. The crypto-Jews, or the conversos, B'nai Anusim, the children of the forced ones or descendants of the forced converts, sometimes called Moranos, but that's not a word that anyone uses anymore. It's not a nice word at all. It means pigs. Of Portugal, these are the people who kept on faithfully being Jewish through all the centuries of the Inquisition, no matter what the dangers were, and started to come out in the early 20th century as Jews, and then under the Portuguese dictatorship, went back, many of them, to living as Christians again. And then in 1975, the same day as the Italian liberation you were celebrating yesterday, the Portuguese liberation, the liberation of the Carnations, they call it. After that, they started coming out for real, and Jewish life is now really flourishing in Portugal. So in the 1990s, I did a lot of work in these communities where these women who are no longer with us were the oldest of the old hidden Jewish prayer women. And I interviewed many of them in their homes and recorded some of their prayers and their customs and their memories. In 2017, I was in Sicily and Calabria, and I had an opportunity to look in a little bit into the emerging Jewish communities in Sicily and in Calabria, and of course as well elsewhere in Italy. So you can see they've started to put up street signs in both Hebrew and Arabic, reflecting the Jewish and the Muslim past of parts of Sicily. This is in Palermo, and this is an old chapel which possibly sits over the ruins of a medieval synagogue and is being made into a new synagogue as we speak. I think there's at least one person listening, Evelyn, who knows much more about this than I do, and in fact taught me everything I know about it. This is in Nicastro, which was a very old traditional Jewish settlement. Serra Stretta near Nicastro, which has Rabbi Barbara Aiello, who has returned to the town of her ancestors to create a Jewish community there. You can see in Siracusa the signs showing the way to the old Giudecca, with even restaurants and other forms of entertainment. In Palermo, really serious, interesting courses that were going on while I was there, a course on Torah study, Jewish culture, Jewish history. So Italy is having a really exciting, they've always been Jews in Italy. I mean, they've been Jews in Italy for millennia, longer than there have been Jews in Spain. But the south of Italy in particular is undergoing a very, very exciting renaissance of Jewish life right now that I hope to, when we can travel again, go back to and learn more about. And just to end off, reimaginings in so-called medieval festivals. So I told you way back in the beginning that Sephardic music is not medieval. Some of the words to the old ballads do go back to the Middle Ages, but not the tunes. And most of the songs that you hear are not medieval at all. They're late 19th, even early 20th century songs, but the imagination of them as medieval is very popular. And so this myth began to spread very quickly. The old Romance texts were assumed, and this was not the case, they were assumed to have melodies as old as the text. And soon people started talking about all Sephardic songs as if they were medieval and they were all 500 years old. In 1992, 500 years since 1492, since the expulsion, we started to see a lot of events that called themselves Medieval Festival of the Three Cultures. And they were singing all kinds of, later songs as if they were medieval. And they started calling all Sephardic songs passionate and spiritual and so on. And these are some of the scenes that I've taken photos of over the years. If you think you see me in this picture, you're right. Here I am. This is 1994, perhaps, I think. And my daughter, whom you saw singing with Jerry Neldo. And these people are not Jewish. They're dressed up as Jews for the occasion of the mock Sephardic medieval wedding. In fact, these two men are a couple. They married as soon as it was legal for same-sex marriages to exist in Spain, but they were already a couple then. This is in the town of Hervas, which is popularly assumed to be all Jewish. It did have a Jewish past, but so did most other towns in Spain. This is the town of Albuquerque, where they were playing modern Sephardic songs that they labeled as medieval on plastic recorders, flauta dolce, while eating watermelon, as you can see. This is in the same town where they got mixed up and thought that a Jewish bride rode on a donkey to her wedding. And so she's mounted on a donkey, and somebody dressed up sort of as a priest is calling himself a medieval Jew. This is in Guarda, where they have an Inquisition theater, and everybody can condemn this pretty girl from the tourist office who is dressed up as part of her tourist office work as somebody to be tied to the stake in the Inquisition. So you can see that there's all kinds of different approaches to Sephardic songs, old and new. And I've just given you a tiny, tiny little tip of the iceberg. And we'll leave a little time, and maybe, I don't know, Fabrizio, you might have a few questions, or there might be questions from other people.
So, Judith, thank you very much. It was a real treat. I was excited to hear all about so distant places, ranging from Spain and Portugal in the Middle Ages to Israel and present-day Morocco or the United States or Canada.
And Sicily.
So it's amazing. Yes, of course, Sicily as well. And you should have added also, you didn't know at the time, of course, but you have to come back to Lecce, because we did something that has been done in Palermo as well, because last year we decided to add the Hebrew translation of the street names of some of the streets that were part of the old Jewish neighborhood in Lecce. So now we have the names of the streets in both Italian and Hebrew, just to give a feeling of this revival of interest in Jewish history, in local Jewish history. So it's amazing what you've been doing and what you've been presenting to us so far. It's really amazing. I really have many questions, but I think it would take a long time, too much time to.
We'll have to do this again in Lecce.
Yeah. For sure. I've
Gonna
been,
be
I've
way
been
up on my
inviting you.
list.
You've been there. You've been there long ago, but I know you were in Sicily. How long? 2 years ago? When were
It
you
was
there?
2017.
Okay, so 3 years ago, you were there 3 years ago, and then we were waiting for
Before,
a new occasion, for a new opportunity for you to come to Italy.
lunchtime. It's
And,
been 10 years since
I'd
I saw
like
you.
to see what you've been doing since then, because when you were in Lecce, we hadn't even started our projects at the museum. So, but now there's a revival, and there's also a revival which is related. It was already there when you came to Lecce. I don't remember if you met some people of the new communities, of the new
Just
communities.
beginning, I remember.
Frani, probably we dealt with that.
And you took me on a walk through the streets, and you showed me some of the old streets that were associated with Jewish life.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's getting more and more interesting, in my opinion, hopefully so. And we'd like to know more. We'd like to do more in order to revive this past. So I was thinking that listening to these tunes and these melodies, it was like imagining what life, probably, who knows, I mean, was something similar, more similar to what life could have been or could have sounded like in 15th century Lecce, when the biggest community, the biggest Jewish community in Lecce, which should have been a rather big community in numbers, would be a Sephardic community, because most of the Jews in that period came from Spain, especially from the end of the 14th to the early 15th century. Many Jews came from northern Spain, from Catalonia and from Provence as well. And they probably spoke the local Latin languages, and they start meeting with the local populations and speak the local dialects as well. And they were probably mixing up the two languages. And I imagine
mixing up the tunes also, because what Jewish communities have done forever is adapt their songs to the melodies of the community where they're living in.
Exactly. And we know from our research that most of those Jews who were coming from Spain and later on from Portugal through southern Italy, through Puglia especially, they ended up either in Salonika or in Constantinople, but most of them, particularly from Lecce, ended up in Corfu, in the island of Corfu. So we've been researching on the island of Corfu and the traditions of the island of Corfu.
Well, now I know where I have to go with you next time I come to Italy. That's it.
We have to go there because it's just
that's the
very close to Lecce. It's very easy to get there. Well,
okay,
now
that's the next project.
the flight connection from there, it's very quick.
And
you know that the cancionerio, to say so, of the Corfioti community, of the Corfu community, is a blending has a blending of languages as usual, like in the Balkan communities, as well as we were describing them. And the tunes were very similar to the Italian tunes in the same period, of course. So it's very interesting that we found out, for instance, working on some manuscripts, we found out that there was a wedding song which was used, in Corfu in the 17th, 18th century. I don't know if we have the music, the melody that we used in those days, but the text is exactly the same that was used for non-Jewish communities in southern Italy already in the 15th century. So this is very interesting. I can refer you to the articles, to the.
Do you see my high tech? I'm making a note of this now with my high tech, with the highest tech of all, a pencil and a piece of paper. I'm jotting it down to make sure I ask you.
Yeah. Please feel free. I will send you all details, and it's really very interesting. There's a lot of things that we are discovering more and more. And but we'd like to know more about music. As you were saying, it's very difficult to know the tunes because most of them are relatively modern.
Well, also people didn't write the tunes down very much. It
exactly.
wasn't so simple. Now it's very simple, to write down music. But at the time, it wasn't that easy. And so
Yeah.
people wrote down words all the time, but they didn't usually write down the tunes of folk tunes.
Exactly.
So you can
Exactly.
sing, I told you the other day, we're putting on several stories from Boccaccio with the storytellers. So I can sing Ecco la Primavera, and I will sing it on Friday night for the storytellers because they wrote out the music. But that was already a formal composition. It wasn't, a local folk song. So, we don't have a lot of folk tunes written down from that time. There are a few. There's quite a few from France, for example, that were written down at the time. And here and there you do find them. But it's really, really hard to know what tunes the Jewish people were using for their songs at the time.
Yeah.
But we do know for sure that Jews have always, always, always, wherever we are, we always adapt melodies of wherever we're living. So we have some old tunes, especially in the synagogue, especially for the more solemn and serious holidays. In that case, the rabbis try and keep some of the old tunes and the old ways of singing going, for sure. But for the folk tunes and the semi-religious tunes, the religious holidays, vernacular words and so on, they really tend to use music from wherever it is they're living.
Yeah.
And you saw in the music, they're not, they don't reject things. They might take a really, really beautiful old Bulgarian song, but they also might take a Charleston melody.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were mentioning before, like Dioscherina, or yes, they could use Verdi operas or whatever. That's really interesting. Yeah. So there's so much to discover and so much to spread, because most people do not know anything, starting from the tradition of setting up operas on Purim, for instance. This is very interesting because, of course, Purim Spielen were very popular from the Middle Ages on, but the idea of adapting Purim Spielen to Verdi's opera, for instance, is very
but they called them operettas. They were like light opera, like opera buffa almost. They weren't like serious opera. They called them operetta. And they even did them in the schools, in Istanbul, Constantinople, and Salonika. Even the school children put them together.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting, really. And because this is part of this folk, which is what is generally called folk tradition, folk culture, which sometimes it's popular, but sometimes it's a real mixture of different registers, different levels, social levels. And it's from these blendings of different levels that you can find out track back traces of different layers, of cultural layers. And this is really what interests me. And this is what should be done for Southern Italy, especially because of this total lack of Jewish tradition for such a long period.
Well, like I said, I can see what my next project is as soon as we're allowed to travel again.
Yeah. So this is something we'd like to know more, like to discover.
Yeah.
So I'm opening the floor to the audience. I mean, if anybody is interested or would like to share this opportunity to talk to Judith, waiting for her to come over to Puglia to perform live in Lecce.
Anybody have any questions here? I don't know.
Commenting, our friends are commenting, our musicians and musicologists from Lecce are saying that everything's very interesting, but I'd like them
Nadia Martinez, Van Damme.
Yeah, Nadia performed for us 3 days ago, actually on Thursday. She's a young singer from Oria. Oria is a village, a small city not far from Lecce, that had a very important Jewish tradition, a very important Jewish community in the Middle Ages. And she, for personal reasons, she did a dissertation on Jewish music, general.
Oh,
and then she started singing, and she devoted her talent. She has a wonderful voice, and she devoted her skill to Ashkenazi, mostly to Ashkenazi repertoire rather than Sephardic, but she also sings Sephardic music.
Oh, I should tell you, Fabrizio, when I was in Palermo in 2017, you know, it was for the International Symposium on the Ballad. Well, the publication has come out. And in it, I actually have an article that Nadia might be interested in. Well, you might also, but it compares some aspects of ballads in the Yiddish Ashkenazi tradition and the Sephardic tradition.
That's wonderful. I think she would love it. Yeah.
So it's published in that collection, and there's a lot of writing about music and ballads in Italy and street music in Italy that people would be interested in. I'll send you the link. I don't have the link with me, but I'll send you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I will forward it to Nadia. There's a lot of things to do. So Gary, for instance, Gary, who's writing right now, I don't know if you can see the same message right away. Gary Feingold, he's a wonderful friend from the Netherlands. And he has a wonderful story because he's American Israeli, but he lives in the Netherlands. He's a dancer, and he has a dancing company in Amsterdam. And we are right now organizing a jazz conversation on jazz and performance, a jazz performance, which will take place in a few days from now. And he's following our activities. And so there's a world that opens up, and we are so happy about that. And this possibility given to us of sharing this common knowledge on a worldwide level is absolutely magnificent. I thank you so much. Really, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity and keeping after me, and I did it. And also thanks to Marta. We don't see her, but she worked.
Marta is amazing. Yeah, she helps us so much. She's been helping, and she helps us so much.
And I'm really looking forward to meeting her in person now, Marta. I can't wait to meet you. And Nadia, I want to read your thesis, your dissertation, and get to know you also. Great.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you know that of course, our videos are recorded, and many people, many followers see them, listen to our recordings on everyday basis, and there might be more questions, and we'll be answering them with your help, and we'll be sending you our correspondence, and we'll be in touch.
It's an honor to be collaborating with you, Fabrizio. It's really exciting.
The honor is ours because you are the star. We only have to bow in front of you. So thank you so much. Really, thank you so much. It was amazing. I enjoyed it so much. It was real fun and learning, and I learned so much. And I really hope there will be a day as soon as possible when we'll be able to invite you in Lecce.
And, we all are waiting for that day. Okay, so stay safe, keep well. Everyone stay safe, stay well.
Stay well, take care. And we'll be in touch
on the screen and off the screen as soon as possible. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye. Bye, everybody. So thank you very much for staying with us, for listening to our fabulous guest tonight. Questa sera abbiamo avuto un ospite davvero straordinaria, Judith Cohen, che in poche parole, con la sua verve assolutamente teatrale, ci ha fatto conoscere tutto il mondo sefardita in un'ora. E tantissime di queste tradizioni si stanno perdendo, tantissime invece sono oggetto di studio. Adesso, per esempio, il Centro Primo Levi sta conducendo a New York, sta conducendo un bellissimo studio sulla tradizione degli ebrei italiani di Rodi, e quindi tutte queste tradizioni sono molto utili per creare una connessione mondiale tra studiosi e comunità ebraiche che purtroppo, per i motivi che conosciamo tutti sono quasi scomparse, ma la loro memoria non scompare, e per fortuna ci sono tantissime persone che apprezzano queste tradizioni e che continuano a rivitalizzarle e a tenerle vive. E noi vi ringraziamo ancora dell'ascolto e ci sentiamo domani per una conversazione a 3 voci almeno sui luoghi da visitare, gli itinerari possibili del Salento ebraico. Vi aspettiamo domani. Buonasera.